Mary Mallon was a cook and an asymptomatic typhoid carrier, and yeah, those two things do not mix well. Mary was born in Cookstown, Tyrone. That's right, Tyrone's an Irish name, and what became Northern Ireland in 1870, coming to America around 1883 and becoming quite a good cook. By 1900, she had begun to find employment as a cook for wealthy families. And for some odd reason, wherever she worked, people began to come down with typhoid. So, typhoid is caused by this little bastard, Salmonella enterica, who sets up camp in your intestines and spreads through contact with infected fecal matter. This was normally caused by poor sanitation, drainage issues, problems you rarely saw in the affluent families that Mary had worked for. So I'm sure you're probably wondering, if typhoid is spread through fecal matter, how did a cook spread the disease? Well, I guess now's a good time to have a conversation about thoroughly washing your hands. Use soap and hot water, scrub vigorously for at least 20 to 30 seconds. People, you gotta wash your hands. Even though the food Mary cooked was heated high enough to kill the bacteria, anything she served raw, such as fresh peaches, were fair game. By the way, Salmonella was named after a veterinarian named Daniel Salmon. And remember, this video was brought to you by the letter W. W for wash your hands. Between 1900 and 1907, Mary worked for 7 different families, and at each stop, family members became ill with typhoid-like symptoms, and one woman died. In 1906, she went along with a family to Oyster Bay, a rather, I'll say, highfalutin vacation spot, and of course, over half the family became sick there. This was considered odd, again, because typhoid was looked at as more of a poor person's disease, not people who rented houses in the same neighborhood as Teddy Roosevelt. Later that year, George Soper was hired to look into the typhoid outbreaks, and his research led him to one conclusion: Mary Mallon. She looked and seemed fit as a fiddle, but so many people around her became suddenly ill, there had to be a connection. When he was called to an outbreak where a girl died and found that Mary was the cook, he was convinced that she had to be a carrier. He tried to talk to her, explaining that though she didn't show any symptoms, she had the disease, but she didn't believe him. The New York Health Department even sent Josephine Baker to try to reason with Mary, but she refused to stop working as a cook, and so shortly after, she was arrested. It was around this time that the press started to spread the news, and soon she began to be known as Typhoid Mary. A possible way out for her could have been to have her gallbladder removed, seeing as it was believed that that was where the bacteria was located in her body, but she refused to do so, still believing that she wasn't sick. She ended up being isolated for the next 3 years on North Brother Island, after which she agreed to take the necessary precautions to keep from spreading the disease, aka washing her hands, and to no longer seek employment as a cook. She worked as a laundress for a short time before changing her name and returning to the better paying job of cook. And of course, outbreaks continued everywhere she went. She ended up getting over 50 people sick, and at least 3 died. Soper knew this tune and knew full well who the musician was, but she stayed a step ahead of him as she moved from job to job. Eventually, Mary was caught and returned to her quarantine on North Brother Island, where she lived the rest of her life, dying of pneumonia in 1938. By the way, after she died, they did an autopsy on her body and found her gallbladder teeming with living salmonella bacteria. Her body was cremated and buried in StRaymondsCem Cemetery. So, the moral of the story here is simple. Seriously, people, wash your damn hands.